Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined once again by BadgerBlitz.com staff writer Donnie Slusher. Donnie, great to see you again, man.
Great to be here, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. The biggest thing we're going to talk about today is something you were at in person on Saturday. It was the Badgers Spring Showcase. They didn't have an event like this last year, so it was nice to have the return of at least something that at least a little bit more of the public and the media could see. So you were there, you were in the press box. Let's just start with some of your general impressions of what you saw on the field.
General impressions of what I saw on the field, I would say, like watching practice, we watch the offense kind of like they'll do a series at a time, you know what I mean? But, it seems that often they'll try to like emphasize a certain thing, like they'll like try like a few of the same play. But it was nice to watch the offense just kind of operate, as if it was like a real game and they were just driving down the field. And I thought, from what I saw, the biggest thing was, everyone is talking about how multiple the new offense is, how many new, just how much they do. And I thought that jumped out to me. I feel like the first drive alone, there's 3 or 4, formations, couple that we never really saw under Longo. So that was the biggest thing. They were just always in different formations, always a screen pass. Offense was much less predictable than it's been the past couple of years.
More motion, pre-snap shifting, that sorts of things as well. Gadgetry plays, whether it's end arounds, jet sweeps, etc.
Absolutely, yeah, and also like using guys like Jackson Aker that didn't really get used last year. I mean, he scored on fullback dive, but then also like there was a few like fullback screens that I saw them use, like in different like places for the screens, not just like normal like out to the straight or to the left or to the right, but yeah, just a lot of movement, a lot of variability, and it felt like I was watching a more term pro style gets thrown out a lot, but it does feel truly pro style.
Well, one of the things that will make it feel more pro style is getting back into more of a downhill running game. And that starts up front at the offensive line, who are now minus Kevin Haywood for the season, which is definitely a big blow at left tackle. How did the offensive line look in general? What combinations were they using up front? And, where do you think things stand at left tackle moving forward?
For the majority of practice, I was feeling better because they had Leighton Nelson out there at left tackle, who's been the immediate replacement, with the first team, and I thought he looked good for the most part. I'd say the offense wasn't moving much faster than they have in recent practices. Like if a couple of practices ago, like the offense, they're really trying to go for like longer passes, and they weren't doing much because the line just simply couldn't hold that long. But we saw a much more fast-paced offense, so we didn't get as good of a look as the pass blocking, in the spring showcase from Leighton Nelson. But I thought he looked great, in terms of in the run game. Near the end of practice, I thought, like most of the time I was like, all right, Leighton Nelson's looking good. He's starting to come into form. But near the end of practice, they just kind of threw a wrench into everything, and they started moving guys around. Joe Brunner, the left guard, he got moved to left tackle. And then Kerry Kadenko, who's kind of separated at the right guard race. They put him at guard, and then Emerson Mandel replaced Kerry Kadenko at right guard. And I would say that is probably their best 5 offensive linemen in terms of healthy guys. I think those are the most talented and probably the highest ceiling. But I mean, putting Brunner at tackle, it's one of those that we're just going to have to wait and see. It's difficult to project it because he did play it in high school, but it's much different in college, and it's one of those things that I would like to see them try a little bit more in these last few practices so we can get a solid look.
Let's talk running backs. The name that has been popping at least sort of the second half of spring ball has been Dylan Jones, the redshirt freshman. How did he perform? How did Dupree look? And how does the running back room look now that it's sort of the keys for the most part has been handed over to the younger guys as well as Yacomelli?
And the running backs, that was the room I was probably most anxious, to look at, to find out about, because, like I've said a few times in my articles, like it's just really difficult, to learn about the running backs when they're not really facing real contact or real tackling. It's hard to gauge their true physicality. I was really impressed with Dylan Jones' physicality. He's like in open space. I think he's the best runner. He's probably the fastest guy in the room. Dupree's close up there, but I think Jones probably the best all around athlete. I was really impressed by the way that he was able to bounce off of certain tackles and like the overall physicality that he showed. He's kind of an angry runner too. Like if I was a linebacker or safety and I saw him in open space, I'd probably brace a little bit or hedge a little bit, and that's definitely what this room needs, and other running backs, Dupree, he got banged up recently and he didn't play on Saturday, which is a bummer because he's a guy that, like, we talked about him like a little while ago, but I kind of want to see a little bit more out of him, especially in like kind of a different scheme that's just not about that's not only just focused on getting the running backs in space. I'd like to see him see what developments he's made to his body and see what he looks like in contact. But other than that, I was really impressed by what I saw from Gideon Atuka. He's a guy that was recruited by Longo, but he seems much more suited for this offense. He's very physical. You can put him downfield. And oftentimes they put him, a lot of like dive and power concepts, just running straight into guys. And I thought he flourished in that role.
Yeah, he's got thighs for days, so it's not a big surprise that he's flourishing as a downhill runner. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. Obviously, the biggest emphasis of the offseason has been getting bigger and heavier along the defensive line, the defensive front in general, and want to include the edges. So a lot of new faces in those rooms. Did anyone sort of separate themselves on Saturday as being sort of, the top dog, if you will, along the defensive line and the edge?
On the defensive line, they substituted a lot, like they were trying to show off their depth. They were trying to get as many guys to play as much as possible. So it's hard to say like the true top dog in that room. I feel pretty confident. I feel like if I had to guess, I mean, the first team line that we've been seeing a lot is that Parker Peterson, usually Charles Perkins. I mean, he's been a big stud of spring, and I thought he had another great day on Saturday.
I saw one clip of him tossing Emerson Mandel actually from the weekend. I was like, oh, okay, I see you.
Yeah. He has some nasty to him. He definitely showed that. I thought Corey Walker had a great day. He's one of those bigger edges. I've seen him play both on the outside and on the inside. I thought, I think he has a certain wrath and a fury and an aggression about him that I think this defensive line desperately needs. But also, not answering your question, but if you read anything about that day, I thought Nick Clayton, really, he might have had the best day of any defensive lineman. He had 3 sacks, and he's the kind of guy where he came in like his body is a little bit raw, but he's already big, he's already long, and he seems more developed mentally than I would have thought. He's a real patient tackler. There's a few times where he was kind of like waiting behind the offensive line and then like struck at the exact right moment. So obviously not the top dog, but I think that that was one of those days where he looks like he could be a freshman year player.
Maybe he's a longer Nick Herbig. Who knows? You talk about some of those skills. Herbig was definitely a patient tackler as a freshman and a very, very heady player, even if he wasn't necessarily physically developed. I mean, he was playing like 210, 215, playing outside backer and doing quite well at it. So not to put too many lofty expectations on the freshman there. So then obviously the biggest question everyone's always going to have, the quarterbacks. First time really seeing Billy Edwards out there as the leader of the team, trying to, really run the offense against a defense that's going full out at them. How did he look? Was he comfortable? And, what was his rapport like with the receivers on the day?
I thought he looked pretty comfortable for the most part. I thought, what stood out is that he seems to really be building a rapport with Vinny Anthony well, which of the current guys, obviously the guys that are healthy, it's by far the most important connection to make. Because last year, he enters with the most experience from last year, and he was a little bit more one-dimensional last year. He's kind of just like a go-route guy, but he's showing in spring that he has the makings of a real all-around receiver. So I like what I saw from him there. The thing with Edwards is that I still feel like, maybe we'll talk about the loss of Tanner Koziel, maybe not. It's been a big storyline, but I still think that they need like that, quick go-to weapon, in short yardage situations, because this is a very, this offense, they like to pass quickly. They like the quick game, but they're of guys currently on the roster that are currently out there, like maybe it's gonna be Tucker Ashcraft, but he just is not enough of a difference maker as a receiver, in my opinion. At least we haven't seen enough of that play consistently. I mean, wrote about this recently, but I feel like Trech Kahuna, like he's still a huge X factor for this offense. Like I think that he could be kind of like just like that, quick pass, like central, like the offense. They just need something, like with all this pressure. I mean, there's been some pressure a lot in practice recently, and if it's bad now, it's probably going to be bad again when they face Ohio State and Alabama later on in the year. And so I think that maybe we'll probably also talk about the transfer portal, the spring window, and I think that they should be looking at potential maybe tight ends, just like quick game receivers. We'll see.
I think that Tretch could be Julian Edelman light in this offense, and be the guy who can get to his spot quickly and have very sure hands, even if he's not physically bigger than a lot of guys. He's going to be in the right place at the right time. And I think that's sort of the upside there for Tresh, assuming he's coming back 100% healthy. Let's move to talking about the portal, because you mentioned that Tanner Kazil, we hardly knew ye, as he's back in the portal, as is Mark Hamper, the receiver. Derek Jensen from last year's recruiting class also hit the portal, the Wisconsin native. And, the Badgers, though, on the flip side, have added they have added to, including a backup quarterback, which I think is a really interesting addition for them, from one of the Illinois schools. I can't remember which Illinois
Southern
school.
Illinois, I think.
Sure, why not? Let's go with that. But I think that I think that's interesting. I don't think it really says anything about like their confidence in Edwards or necessarily O'Neal. I just think they need warm bodies in that room at the moment, because they still, went through spring ball with 3 scholarship quarterbacks, which is not very much. As much as we love Milos, the walk-on, that's only 4 healthy quarterbacks, and you'll see most college rosters have 6. Mm-hmm. And so they really just needed warm bodies in there. So Hunter Simmons, who is coming over from Southern Illinois. So that'll be interesting to see if he goes and tries to compete for the starting job next year, how that looks. But I think that this doesn't really have anything to do with Billy Edwards whatsoever.
I'd agree with that. Not Edwards for sure. Maybe if you want to talk about O'Neal, like whether or not like we're seeing enough out of him. I thought he's been like progressing well throughout spring. I thought early on I was not that impressed with what I saw from him, but I thought he's slowly been looking more comfortable. Not a totally consistent player, because certain days he'll. He had the biggest passing play of the day on Saturday when he just early on, like one of the first plays he was out there, he just went back and ripped a 50 yarder to Joseph Griffin down the sideline. He's capable of doing that, but you don't get that, out of a backup quarterback, you kind of want just like a safe, steady hand out there that you're not going to have to worry too much about, like the variance. And he was a little bit too, he had a little bit too much variance for maybe what you want out of a backup quarterback. And also Carter Smith, he's just still pretty raw, and he's still like, they were probably thinking about last year when they had, like when Tyler Van Dyke went down and then Braden Locke, they didn't really like what they saw out of him. And the only other guy there was a true freshman who wasn't ready. And so they're probably thinking about that again, like if they've had awful luck in that room the past couple of years. And, like if I still think that they feel confident in Danny, but they probably just want another option.
Yeah. I think at the portal, it's going to be interesting. You mentioned that they might go for a tight end. I think that offensive tackle now is definitely something that they can be looking at, especially I think Joseph Maddox, I should say, is the big name out of South Dakota, who's one of the top offensive tackles in the portal. And I know the Badgers are highly interested in him, as are many schools, because, good tackles, don't come easy. So I think it's going to be interesting there. Can you see anywhere else that they will be trying to adding in this small spring portal window?
Maybe we just brought up tight end, but maybe slot receiver, because, Tretch is honestly like the only like true slot receiver,
I
like
would
on the
argue
roster.
Barry Johnson is a true slot receiver.
When I say true slot, I mean like Ty Berry, like he kind of plays all over, like and his skill sets are kind of all over. He's a little bit more like they could put him out wide, but I don't think they'll put Tretch out wide. I mean in
Fair
that
enough.
sense,
Fair enough.
yeah. But just like I said, like the receivers, they have a lot of guys. They have a lot of perimeter guys. Like with high upside guys like Tyrell Henry, Chris Brooks. But like when it comes to just like Julian Edelman type players, Lad McConkey type players that you just I just need him to run the best 3 yard out route that I've ever seen. I just need him to get open on this play. I think it's Tretch, and that's pretty much it on the roster. And Tretch is injured right now, and you don't want to put too many eggs in the Tretch basket come September.
Yeah, and you don't want to pile it all on Vinny's plate because he's going to start getting double teamed on every obvious passing down. So
Yeah.
You're definitely going to have to find more targets to spread around. We'll see if any other guys, younger guys, can develop, step up. It could be Eugene Hilton, quite frankly. He doesn't have necessarily, he might not get to that spot, but if you throw the ball up his way, it sounds like for the most part, he's coming down with it.
I mean, it's not just that. Like, there were a few plays I saw where they would just kind of like on Saturday, they would just kind of like put him on an island and then make him do like an out route or just some like quick shifty route, and he just got open so easily. And I know he was facing up against other young guys with the second team, even third team sometime, but I mean, the way he moves is just different, like freshmen, 18-year-olds who are supposed to be, thinking about their senior prom. They shouldn't move that well, and they shouldn't have as easy of a time getting open and coming down with the ball as that.
Yeah, I think as many other people are very excited about his potential. And if Tretch does remain injured, there's going to be snaps available. There's going to be snaps available even if Tretch is fully healthy because, Quincy Burrows also entered the transfer portal. He didn't get a ton of run, but he was one of the more veteran receivers on the roster who had seen at least some action in his collegiate career. So, that's more snaps available for a guy like Hilton, moving here into 2025. So, let's look ahead to 2026, at least the class of 2026. The Badgers got another offensive line commitment, this time Maddox Cochrane out of Virginia, who definitely projects to tackle at 6'7", 295. A very long prospect, but from all indicators that he's someone who definitely has the right frame to add the necessary weight. And, just looking at his tape just a little bit, I'll go back to what our old friend Clint Cosgrove says. You look for guys with skinny ankles. And for his size, he's got skinny ankles, which is usually a decent indicator of athleticism. So, though I'm curious, Donnie, sort of what this means and what the Badgers have left to do for the offensive line class in 2026.
I know I love scouting offensive linemen. Like when it comes to high school guys, like
Oh,
you
me
really
too.
have no,
It's the best.
you really have like no idea what they're going to look like in a few years. So you got to look at stuff like ankles.
Yep, absolutely. No, my favorite tape to watch is running backs. Like it will always running back tape is just the most fun. Like I can see a quarterback slinging it, whatever. There's something about like a really dominant high school running back that just like brings me joy to watch. So yeah.
No, a quarterback and receiver tape can almost be like boring sometimes in high school, just because it's like, oh, another 50-yard bomb, right in the breadbasket. Oh, nice, but like running backs, just like even like watching a guy run through somebody, like it's always going to be fun,
like
no matter what level.
I'll be honest, a lot of those like 12-yard gains where someone's broken like 6 tackles and juked 2 other guys out of their socks, like that's way more interesting and fun to watch and indicative of your overall football skills than the kid who's 6'3" in high school and is running a 4.5, just running by some like 5'2" freshman cornerback. Like, well, what are you going to do with that? So, but that's just a personal preference. Offensive line running back tape is always the most fun to watch. So, but let's get into Cochrane though. Like I said, definitely projected tackle. So sort of where does he fit and where does the rest of the class go here in 26?
I think he fits well. I mean, obviously he brings a lot of athletic upside, like with the frame, and he's likely going to play tackle. But like reading his little interview that he did with BadgerBlitz, talking about how the Badgers only want to have 3, maybe 4 offensive linemen in this cycle, like, which I understand, like it is kind of like a loaded young room, but I feel like this is probably like better for him in a way, like to sign with like better for like Maddox than it is for the Badgers, because like he's a guy that like he has a lot of athletic upside, but like a lot of guys like reading about him, like they emphasize like the upside, you know what I mean? So it's not like there's still some work to do, you know what I mean? So like it's good for him to get with a good program like the Badgers, with a coach like Blazek, and because like this is a room that they might, I don't know. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, because like guys can like flip commitments, could come from anywhere, and you don't want the room to be too loaded. So the biggest thing is that they're gonna have to be pretty deliberate with how they fill out the rest of this room. You know what I mean? Like they should probably be more willing to to go after the big guys, to go after the home run hits and the rest of the tackle, just because they already have a few guys. Novak seems like a pretty good like guard prospect. They already have a few guys who are, a little bit more upside, more on the project side. So I feel like they should try to go out and maybe spend a little bit of money on, on a better prospect.
I'm curious if they do that, especially how they fill, if there really only is one spot left here in this class, and especially if you're going to go for someone big. Are you looking for another tackle, or are you looking for an interior player? Because I think of the true young guys that I feel really, really good about. Obviously, Haywood is someone that everyone feels great about, despite the injury. Mandel is definitely someone everyone feels seemingly very, very good about. I think Nolan Davenport early this year is someone that seems to have gotten a lot of really positive buzz. And so I'm curious though, like, are they going to be looking for, a guard center and interior offensive lineman, or do they want to keep going after, some of these big tackles? It wouldn't hurt, I think, if you're going after that big 4-star kind of guy, to get someone who's like a real Mauler type to play right tackle, I think is sort of what I would be looking for. But again, I'm not in the room, and also like probably also just going to take the best talent available.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of what recruiting eventually comes down to. Like if you have a good guy there, like just get him.
Yeah, absolutely, just get him. So, more visits, official visits coming up this season. My last question for you today is going to be: what position in 2026 do they need to close on here as the May and early June officials come up? What position is going to be most critical for the team as they move forward?
Like most critical, like that they still need to get
for the 2026 class. Like what do they really need in the class right now? What's the sort of the biggest glaring red flag?
I'll say, I still feel, wish you prep me on this, because I've there are a few avenues that they could go in. I want to talk about Ryan Hoskins for a second, because I feel like, the more I read about him, the more I was kind of the less sure I was, because he hasn't played that much, he's transferring to modern day, like over this offseason, you know what I mean? So a lot of people like labeled him as like a modern day quarterback, but he hasn't played at that level,
He was at JSerra.
Yeah, at JSerra. He was at JSerra, and it was more of a run heavy offense, which is probably like what he's going to be stepping into, like with Wisconsin. But I want to see more, I'll be watching modern day pretty closely this season, because I do think that he still has a lot to prove. I'm not totally like the way like Carter Smith, like I was pretty ready to be like, all right, Carter Smith, like he's the guy that you can see as a quarterback of the future. Hoskins, I am going to watch attentively and try to kind of wait for him to kind of prove it in a way. I mean, so like quarterback, not saying that they should get another guy. I feel like I kind of agree with like the one per class, but I don't know. I'm not sold on Hoskins.
I'm going to take the devil's advocate position here for you, because if he really is this guy who has all these traits that he showed at JSerra, even if he didn't get the opportunity to throw the ball 30 times a game, if he is that guy playing with better teammates, he could blow up and have, the real heavyweights coming to play, whether it's a USC in his backyard, whether it's an Ohio State, someone like that. I think if this season does go very, very well for him, it might be tough to hold on to him.
Absolutely. And if he does well enough, then he'll just get, offered a Lamborghini, and then we won't have to worry about him because he'll go to Colorado or USC.
Well, let's hope for Badger fans that he does ball out and that he does stay committed to UW, because again, like he's someone who does, who could be very, very, very good if everything plays out, the way that, he's projected to be. So no matter what happens, though, me and Donnie will be here to talk about it. So thank you, everyone here, for tuning in to Badger Blitz TV. Make sure you're subscribing to BadgerBlitz.com for all of the best Badger coverage anywhere in the known universe. Until next time, he's Donnie Slusher. Make sure to follow him on X at Donnie Slusher _. I'm Matt Perkins, and we'll see you in the den.